Your modern SUV is a plastic lie, but in 1999, Ford built a 9,000-pound civilian tank so massive that the Environmental Protection Agency did not have a law to govern it. This is the Ford Excursion, the biggest, heaviest, and most defiant passenger vehicle ever to roll off an American assembly line. While the government was tightening the noose on fuel economy, Ford realized that if they made a vehicle heavy enough, the rules simply vanished. By exploiting an 8,600-pound gross vehicle weight loophole, they created a monster that was technically invisible to corporate average fuel economy standards. It was a 4-ton fortress powered by a 7.3-liter Iron Giant built by International, a motor designed for school buses, not suburban driveways. But environmentalists panicked, and a secret BlockerBeam had to be hidden under the bumper just to keep this tank from crushing everything in its path. Why did the world's toughest SUV become a corporate outlaw? September 30th, 1999. Ford does not just pull a sheet off a new SUV, they roll out a 19-foot chrome grilles monolith and dare the press to find a parking space big enough to hold it. The Excursion's launch in Detroit is a spectacle of flashbulbs and nervous laughter. Reporters circle the beast, tape measures in hand, as Ford executives recite stats with the confidence of men who know they have just broken the rules and written new ones. At nearly 19 feet from bumper to bumper, the Excursion dwarfs the Chevrolet Suburban, casting a shadow over every so-called full-size SUV in the lot. The Kentucky truck plant in Louisville, already home to Super Duty pickups, is now the birthplace of the largest passenger vehicle America has ever seen. On paper, the Excursion is a 9,000-pound tank. That is the headline, the myth, the badge of honor. But step up to the scales and the real numbers start to peel back the legend. Curb weight, the number you get with a full tank of diesel and nobody inside, lands around 7,700 pounds for the diesel model. The sticker on the door tells a different story. Gross Vehicle Weight Rating, GVWR, stamped at 8,900 pounds. That 1,200-pound gap is not just dead weight, it is the regulatory no man's land that lets Ford call this a truck, not an SUV. It is the difference between being shackled by EPA fuel economy rules and slipping through as a Class 2B medium-duty ghost. No CAFE penalty, no MPG sticker, no window label to warn the next suburban dad how fast a 44-gallon tank disappears. The Excursion's footprint is not just a number, it is a physical fact that warps the world around it. In the press lot, it overhangs standard parking spaces by half a meter. The rear Dutch doors slam shut with a sound more familiar to delivery truck drivers than soccer moms. Step up into the cab and the view over traffic is pure command, higher than a city bus, with the cackle of the 7.3-liter Powerstroke vibrating through the pedals. Even idling, the smell of diesel and vinyl floods the senses, a reminder that this is not a car, it is a rolling loophole. Ford has taken the language of regulations, curb weight, GVWR, Class 2B, and turned it into steel, glass, and swagger. The invisible giant is born, and it is already rewriting the rules before the first customer signs the paperwork. Step onto the scale with a Ford Excursion, and the myth meets reality. Diesel models, stripped of passengers but heavy with a full tank, land at just over 7,700 pounds. The sticker on the door claims an 8,900-pound gross vehicle weight rating. That is a 1,200-pound gap that is not an accident. That space is the line between a regulated passenger vehicle and a Class 2B medium-duty truck. And that classification lets Ford sidestep EPA fuel economy rules and slip through the corporate average fuel economy net. The Excursion's mass is more than just a number. It is a calculated move, a loophole you can feel in the steel. Inside the owner community, numbers become ritual. Forums fill with scale ticket photos, each one proof of a suburban tank's true heft. The first time an owner loads up the family, the dog, and a trailer and rolls onto a cat scale at a truck stop, it is more than a measurement. It is a rite of passage. That 900-pound margin between curb weight and gross vehicle weight rating is a badge, a sign that your fortress was built to live in a legal gray zone. But the Excursion story is written in more than figures. The rear Dutch doors slam with a valse finality, echoing through the steel shell. The air inside is thick with diesel, hot oil, and sun-baked vinyl. Turn the key and the 7.3-liter Powerstroke answers with a cackle, a vibration that climbs from the pedals to your chest. From the driver's seat, you are level with city bus drivers, watching traffic peel away as the invisible giant passes. Within the circle, some rituals verge on superstition. The cam position sensor, called CPS, is the weak link. Every veteran keeps a spare CPS and a 10mm wrench in the glove box. If it fails, the tank becomes a stranded monument, helpless in rush hour. For all its mass and muscle, the Excursion's might depends on the smallest part. On the surface, the Excursion is a rolling monument to American excess, a 9,000-pound civilian tank, or so the legend goes. But the real magic trick is buried in the paperwork, not the steel. Crack open the federal code and you find the dividing line, 8,500 pounds gross vehicle weight rating, known as GVWR. That is the legal firewall between a light-duty vehicle, shackled by EPA fuel economy rules and window stickers, and a medium-duty truck, which is effectively invisible to CAFE standards. The Excursion's door jamb does more than flash a number, it waves a flag. GVWR 8,900 pounds. That 400-pound surplus is not about payload or towing. It is a shield forged in the language of the Department of Transportation and the EPA, designed to keep this beast out of the regulatory crosshairs. Ford's compliance team did not leave this to chance. An internal memo circulated in 1999 spells it out in black and white: target a GVWR of at least 8,600 pounds for any future truck-based SUV. The memo cites the NHTSA's FMVSS 89 table and the EPA's medium-duty vehicle fuel use test procedure. The message to engineers is simple: build it heavy, certify it as Class 2B, and the Excursion becomes a ghost in the fuel economy machine. No EPA window sticker, no CAFE penalty, no public record of just how fast a 44-gallon tank can vanish. The Excursion's curb weight, about 7,700 pounds for a diesel, with nobody inside, leaves a 1,200-pound gap to the official GVWR. That gap is not dead weight, it is a loophole you can drive a tank through. Class 2B is not just a bureaucratic label, it is the difference between a vehicle that must answer to every new emissions rule and one that slips through the cracks, reporting fuel use in gallons per 1,000 pound-mile instead of miles per gallon. The Excursion's stats, length, axle rating, fuel capacity are all engineered to tip the scales just enough. The result is a family hauler that sidesteps the rules, sells without a fuel sticker, and leaves regulators chasing shadows. The invisible giant is not just a truck, it is a paper shield, built clause by clause in legalese, then hammered into steel at the Kentucky truck plant. The Ford Excursion never pretended to be modest. Its 7.3-liter Powerstroke diesel, built by International, was meant for buses and medium-duty trucks, not weekend errands. The HEUI system, hydraulic electronic unit injection, swapped the usual cam-driven pump for high-pressure oil, delivering each shot of fuel with a mechanical punch. The idle chatters through the pedals, and the torque feels bottomless, as if the truck is dragging something far heavier than itself. Ford matched this with the 4R100 automatic transmission, a 10.5-inch Sterling axle rated for 7,500 pounds. Every component is oversized, built for jobs most SUVs would never face. The Excursion's 44-gallon tank is more than a convenience, it is a calculated move. Most SUVs at the time offered about 24 gallons. Ford's tank nearly doubled that, adding almost 300 pounds when filled. That weight nudges the Excursion's gross vehicle weight rating to 8,900 pounds, just above the 8,500 pound threshold that matters most to regulators. Above that line, the Excursion escapes EPA scrutiny. No fuel economy sticker, no CAFE penalty, no official number for critics to point at. On paper, it is a Class 2B medium-duty truck. In reality, it is a suburban fortress, engineered to slip through regulatory cracks. Then there is the tax code. Section 179 of the IRS rules lets businesses write off the entire purchase price of vehicles over £6,000 gross vehicle weight rating in the first year. For contractors, ranchers, and real estate agents, the excursion becomes more than transportation. It is a massive tax deduction. Dealer ads shouted Section 179 eligible, and small business buyers rushed to claim the write-off before the year's end. Engineers built the biggest SUV they could, and buyers saw a rolling tax shelter. The excursion's heft is more than steel and diesel. It is a loophole on wheels, a product of American paperwork and horsepower, welded together for those who knew how to use both. There is a secret bolted under the excursion's nose, a slab of steel known in owner circles as the BlockerBeam. Ford never bragged about it, never filed a patent, never issued a public technical bulletin. Try searching the USPTO or digging through Ford's own TSB archives from 1999 to 2003. You will find nothing. No part number, no glossy engineering drawing, not even a footnote in the service manuals. For most buyers, the BlockerBeam was invisible, just another hunk of metal lost in the truck's shadow. But for safety analysts and a handful of insiders, its silence spoke volumes. This was not an ordinary crossmember. The BlockerBeam was a hush-hush fix, a steel bar tucked behind the bumper to keep the excursion from riding over smaller cars in a crash. Its existence only slipped out when activists started asking hard questions about under-ride deaths and the excursion's high nose. Ford's answer was to quietly install the device on production models and to bury the paperwork. No patent trail, no press release, no public-facing documentation. Not even a mention in the NHTSA recall logs. That gap between what is built and what is admitted became fuel for protest. Safety groups and environmental watchdogs seized on the secrecy, arguing that if the BlockerBeam was so vital, why keep it hidden? For them, the lack of transparency was not just a technical oversight. It was proof of a company willing to play regulatory chess in the shadows, using silence as a shield while the invisible giant rolled out of Louisville by the thousands. By 2004, the invisible giant was no longer just a regulatory ghost. It had become a target. Early one morning, activists from the Sierra Club and Jumpstart Ford chained themselves to dealership fences across the country, locking their wrists to steel as salesmen stared through plate glass windows. News vans rolled up before the first cup of coffee was poured. Headlines blared, "Ford Valdez, America's biggest gas guzzler." The nickname stuck, echoing the Exxon Valdez disaster, and the excursion's image shifted overnight from suburban status symbol to environmental villain. Protesters waved banners painted with dripping oil and cartoon tank treads, calling out the 44-gallon tank and the missing EPA sticker. They demanded answers, not just from Ford, but from regulators who had let the loophole stand. Local news anchors leaned into the spectacle, broadcasting footage of chained wrists and shouting crowds. Dealer lots became battlegrounds, each excursion on display now a lightning rod for outrage. The media surge sent Ford's PR team scrambling. Editorials accused the company of hiding behind the 8,500-pound rule to sell a civilian tank with no accountability. For a moment, the invisible giant was everywhere. Front pages, talk radio, late-night punchlines. The pressure cooker had hit full boil, and the fallout was just beginning. The end came quietly for the invisible giant. On September 19, 2005, the last Ford Excursion rolled off the Kentucky truck plant line, a limited trim, 5.4-liter V8, four-wheel drive, painted in Oxford white. The factory floor, once alive with the clang of Super Duty frames and the thud of Dutch doors, fell silent as the final build ticket was stamped and the last heavy-duty badge checked. After 6 years, more than 195,000 units, and a legacy that stretched from ranches to soccer field parking lots, the program shut down, not with a bang, but a procedural sigh. Inside the plant, workers logged the last excursion into the parts control system. The dedicated excursion bin, once stacked with extended bumper brackets and dual-zone climate modules, was emptied and marked for reassignment. Barcode scanners flickered over the last run of heavy-duty windshield wiper arms and rear gate hydraulic latches. The Excursion's unique weld patterns, programmed into the plant's logic controllers, were wiped from the schedule. For the workforce, it was a strange day. One final torque check on a frame built to survive a decade of abuse, then the slow walkout past the silent jigs. The decision to kill the Excursion was not just about shifting tastes or rising gas prices. The real death blow came from inside the engine bay. Ford's move to the 6.0-liter Powerstroke diesel in 2004 was supposed to keep the invisible giant alive, but the new engine brought a cascade of technical failures. Head gasket blowouts, EGR cooler leaks, and the notorious cam position sensor, now even more failure-prone, turned warranty claims into a flood. Service bays filled with Excursions, waiting for repairs that sometimes never stuck. The 6.0 liters promise of more power and cleaner emissions collapsed under the weight of its own complexity, dragging the model's reputation down with it. By the time the last unit cleared the line, demand had evaporated. Dealers who once bragged about 44-gallon tanks and Section 179 write-offs were now discounting inventory, trying to move unsold giants as fuel prices climbed past $2.50 a gallon. The EPA's tightening grip on fuel economy, the slow but steady pressure from activists, and the endless parade of defect reports made the Excursion's regulatory blind spot impossible to defend. The invisible giant, born in a loophole, was finally cornered by reality. As the plant retooled for expeditions and navigators, the era of the civilian tank ended, not with a scandal, but with a last, heavy door slamming shut. After the last Excursion rolled off the Kentucky truck plant floor, the regulatory chessboard finally shifted. The loophole that let Ford's invisible giant slip past the EPA's gaze did not survive unchallenged. By 2007, the feds quietly raised the upper ceiling for Class 2B trucks from 10,000 to 9,500 pounds. That one-line tweak in the Federal Register closed the escape hatch for any future civilian tanks. Anything heavier would now be counted in the CAFE net, and no more hiding in the medium-duty shadows. The Excursion went extinct just in time, preserved forever as the last SUV built to disappear on paper. But out in the wild, the story was just getting started. The same truck that once drew protest banners and late-night punchlines now commands the kind of money that makes old dealers shake their heads. 7.3 Powerstroke diesels, once dismissed as rolling loopholes, now fetch $40,000, even $50,000 on auction blocks and enthusiast forums. Low-mileage limiteds and Eddie Bauers, especially with the 7.3, are traded like blue-chip stocks. The same regulatory sleight of hand that made the Excursion a villain in the 2000s now gives it a collector's aura, a vehicle that could not be built again, even if Ford tried. Enthusiasts lean into the irony. The forums that once swapped CPS failure stories now post VIN decoders and resale indexes. Owners brag about their pre-policy giants, knowing each year makes them rarer and, in some circles, more desirable. The 9,500-pound ceiling is now a badge of honor, proof that you own a piece of outlaw engineering, a loophole on wheels. The invisible giant lives on, not just in diesel fumes and Dutch door slams, but in the swelling numbers on resale charts. In the end, it was the rulebook, not the marketplace, that wrote the Excursion's obituary. But it is the collector market that is writing its legend. Today, the Excursion still prowls suburbia, a 7,700-pound curb-weight monument to loopholes, not legend. People call it a 9,000-pound tank, but the law only saw an invisible giant, a Class 2B medium-duty truck, immune to CAFE and EPA fuel labels. The real lesson: every blind spot in the code is an invitation to build something outsized. And in America, someone always will. Let me know your take in the comments below.